Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is, what if the Shinobi Alliance learned how important Naruto truly is? If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Konoha. Tsunade Senju, the Godime Hokage of Konoha, sighed loudly when she finished the huge stack of paperwork her assistant, Shizune. 3 years had passed since the Fourth Great Shinobi War, and after Naruto defeated Tonari on the moon, the world had finally come to an era of peace, something that many years ago Tsunade who never thought she would be able to live long enough to witness. All the shinobi and kunoichi around the elemental nation looked up at Naruto, at their savior. He was currently on a mission with his girlfriend, Hinata Hyuga, and was enjoying one of the greatest time of his life, something that no one in the world deserved more than him. Things had been going more smoothly between the 5 major villages than ever. Shizune, can you? But before Tsunade could finish her sentence, she was suddenly engulfed in a blue light, and before she could do anything, she was warped. Tsunade-sama. Shizune screamed out in surprise, but suddenly she found herself being engulfed in the same blue light just like the Godime Hokage. All around the elemental nations, the same blue light began to appear and covered a few ninja from each village. And then, when the light disappeared, the shinobi and kunoichi had disappeared. Tsunade-sama, Tsunade-sama, please wake up. A familiar voice called out to her. Tsunade slowly opened her eyes and saw the Mizukage's smiling face in front of her. The current Hokage of Konoha stood up and saw the other Kage was standing next to her with a relieved smile on their face. She stood up and looked around the place they were in. The place around her looked like the stadium of Konoha, but 10 times bigger, and had a lot of chairs around a table. Tsunade looked around to see a lot of familiar faces have the same curious look like her. She could see the Kankuro and Tamari chatting with each other near them. The familiar guards of Mei Terumi also was standing near their Mizukage and talking with each other, Killer Bee who was standing with his students and of course, raping about the awesomeness of this place. Tsunade also saw her assistant Shizune talking with Naruto's favorite teacher Iruka. She also saw Junin like Anko, Ibiki or Kurenai, who was pregnant, was standing with each other. All the clan head was also present, even a few citizen was there, especially 2 of Naruto's favorite person, Tyuki and Ayame. Sakura was talking with Sasuke, and appearing to be really happy to see him again. Kakashi was chatting with a Junin from Kumo, but Tsunade didn't remember his name. She could also see all the rookie 9 of Konoha was standing around this place. And of course, Guy was shouting everything about youth alongside with his student Rock Lee, while Tenten and Neji were looking at them in disappointed. Wait, Neji. Tsunade gasped and looked around her and saw the 4 previous Hokage and, her eyes beginning to water when she saw Jiraiya and Kushina talking happily with each other, well, except for her granduncle Tobirama was scowling about his brother childishness. Minato was introducing his wife to the first and second Hokage with a happy expression on his face. After everyone had introduced each other to everyone, with the only exception of Jiraiya who happened to receive a hard punch from Tsunade and lost conscious for 30 minutes, but after he woke up he received another punch from Tsunade, and lost conscious again. The ones had participant in the 4th Great Shinobi War spent some more time to tell the lost one like Kushina and Neji about what happened in the war and especially Naruto's life for Kushina. To say the Uzumaki girl really proud of her son was an understatement. But she also hated the village for treating her son like a monster at first, but thanked them for helping her son in the world, especially the rookie 9. Minato and Kushina was a bit miffed they couldn't see Naruto, but were happy that he was okay and finally found a girlfriend in the Princess of Hyuga. Well, the introduced was over, but I'm wondering, does anyone of you know where we are? Minato asked and looked around the stadium. I thought this place was familiar, but it's totally different than anything I have seen. He took out his tri-prongs kunai, and even I can't use Hirishin here, something wasn't right about this place. The other nodded their head. Some of them had tried to use ninjutsu here, but found they couldn't do anything. The only exception was taijutsu and Tsunade's superhuman strength. Whoever sent us here must be really powerful if they can bring the dead people back to life. Sasuke spoke up and many shinobi nodded their head. Then suddenly, something appeared on the table in a flash of light, which then revealed to be a small book with a gold cover and a strange mark that resembled a bird under the title. Hashirama, who was the nearest one to the table, picked it up and showed everyone the book. Fairy's Guardian, Jiraiya asked aloud, getting confused at such strange title, fairy. As in the fairies in fairy tales or bedtime stories. We don't know yet. The first Hokage shrugged before pulling a note from inside the book, and gave it a glance before deciding to read it out loud for everyone to hear. Dear Shinobi and Kunoichi of Elemental Nations, the book you're holding is the story about a man who's called Fairy Guardian, take place several thousand years in the future. What? Everyone cried out in utter shock, as a 200 inches flat screen TV, the largest TV anyone had ever seen, appeared on the table. How is that even possible? Kiba asked loudly, getting confused even more than before. Don't know, but whoever this person is, they want us to read this book. Tobirama Senju said, crossing his arms on his chest, it must be really important then, the future I mean, or else that person wouldn't waste their energy teleport so many alive shinobi and kunoichi, and bring back the dead ones back and put into a place to read a book like this. I agree with Nadaime-sama. Minato said and Kushina nodded her head alongside him. It's actually hard to believe, but someone with that much power probably strong enough to see into the future to write down that book as well. So, I guess I will start first reading it to everyone first. Hashirama smiled and opened the book. Go ahead, brother. Tobirama nodded his head alongside with everyone, he too also curious about his brother counterpart, to see what the boy was doing. Let's see the future. Fairy's Guardian. Fairy Tail charged at Acnogolia. The youngest generation of Fairy Tail, against the Dragon King of Apocalypse. Suddenly, the television was turned on by an unknown influence, showing an image of the Dragon King of Apocalypse, Acnologia. He was gigantic, and had an upper body that covered in black, round scales, which in turn, were decorated by spiraling, blue markings. His lower body, specifically his chin, chest, stomach, inner tail, thighs and arms, were gray in color, and appeared to be rather smooth. Acnologia's eyes were white and beady, and his head was round and blunt with four, large, elongated plates extending backward. His mouth was full of razor-sharp teeth, and attached to his chin was a protrusion that resembled an arrowhead. His large wings were feathery in appearance, akin to a bird's. The scales disappeared at the end of Acnologia's tail, which in itself, ended in a stinger-esque shape. A dragon, but that's impossible. The Tsuchikage, Onoki said in shock, while many others looked at the dragon in awe. Well, we're in the future, right? Minato shrugged. It's several thousand years we're talking about, maybe a new species, such as dragon, appeared and started roaming around the world. Well said, Yondaime. Tobirama nodded his head in agreement. Let's continue, brother. Led by Ezra Scarlet, the other members of Fairy Tail returned to aid Natsu in his assault. The screen flashed again, that time showing a picture of a young woman with long, scarlet hair and brown eyes. She had a slender, voluptuous figure that the men with a pervert personality like Jiraiya could only describe as amazing, and outright drooling at her body. She was wearing a silver set of armors with blue skirt and black boots, with the armor's breastplate composed of a single piece of metal, decorated by curved lines and by a deformed version of cross mark with hearts, with the cross, right arm extending to the right part of her chest, and the added mark, the same mark on the cover of the book, located under the cross itself. Wow, she's really beautiful. Minato admitted, and I got to admit, she looks a lot like you, dear. With the only exception of the eye color, of course. I have great hope for the future already. Jiraiya chuckled perversely, wishing that the red-haired girl showed a little more skin so he could see what was hidden underneath. Against the dragon, in order to protect their master, in order to protect their own, as a family. Oh, I like that. Hashirama made a small smile and nodded his head. Those words sounds amazing, don't they? He asked his brother. He kept a stoic expression and nodded his head nonetheless. I have great hope for the future, but of course, it wasn't the same hope as Jiraiya the Toad Sage. So, the dragon must be the villain then? Kushina asked, and her husband nodded his head in agreement. I wonder what villages are they from, assuming that there are still villages of shinobi around. Risking their life to save one of their own, and consider them their family. These people's bonds must be really strong. Sarutobi smiled. Please continue, Shadaim-sama. Bringing out everything that was left inside them, Fairy Tail team attacked Aknologia, bringing down wave after wave of magic on its gigantic body. Excuse me again, but did I hear that right, magic? So ninjutsu is no longer used, or even exist in the future. And things we can only hear in bedtime stories, such as dragons and magic, are real and actually exist. Tsunade continued her grandfather's statement with a nod of her head. Everything we have seen so far is so magical, isn't it? You little Makarov, the third master of Fairy Tail said in bewilderment, completely shocked for what happened in front of his eyes. I want you to know this, Gramps. Laxus looked at his grandfather and grinned. I was against this. But do you really think that they're the kind of people who can run away and leave an old geezer behind? His grin got wilder as his hands sparked with lightning that could slay dragon. It's your guild, after all. From what we have heard so far, I believe that the black dragon attacked them, but the old man decided to stay behind and hold him back while he led his people, his guild, to run away. Tsunade said with a small smile. That's some really noble action, don't you think? That action must be from the feeling of love. His guild must be really important to him and really care about them. You idiots. Tears swelled up at the corners of Makarov's eyes. He couldn't believe it and he didn't know what to say. He just watched on while sobbing quietly. We really need more of these people in the future. Hashirama smiled fondly at the old man named Makarov. It's so rare to see such a strong bond like that. A little not too far away from the battle, a young girl, with long, wavy, yellow blonde hair that reached down to her feet with a single lock pointing upwards. Large green eyes that appeared to have no irises, peachy skin and a slight childlike build. She was wearing a frilly, pink layered robe with a red ribbon tied in a bow around her neck. Around the chest were 3 blue diamond patterns with 2 blue triangles above. Each series of these was outlined in a hot pink. She wore wing-like adornments around her ears and small hoop earrings and going barefoot. The screen flashed the image of the girl. Holy, she's so cute. Ino and some of the girls squealed out with an extremely high-pitched voice, forcing the boys and men to cover their ears to block the noise from their ears. Their voice had truly lighted up whole place like 1,000 fireworks. She looked at them with a soft smile, yet her eyes were in the sad manner. The next generation of Fairy Tail. Fairy's Tale? Kiba asked. What kind of a name is that? It's Fairy Tail, not Fairy's Tale. Tenten shook her head. And please be quiet, we might find out sooner if you didn't interrupt us. Fighting against the strongest dragon, anyone who knew about the strength of the Dragon King could see that Fairy Tail was fighting in vain, as their attacks did almost no damages to the black dragon. With something that size and withstand that much magical attacks, I believe it's no less weaker than a Biju. Minato said, remembering about the day he fought Kyuubi for the sake of his village, as well as the climax of the 4th Shinobi World against the Jubi. Though, he doubted the creature would be anywhere as strong as the combination of all Biju. She closed her eyes and put her hands together. Please save them. Mavis Vermilion whispered softly, save Fairy Tail. Oh, he must be calling Fairy Guardian, isn't she? Kushina smiled, tightening her fist at the thought of hope for the magic users, who she had taken a liking to just like anyone that were listening to the story. He must be really strong if she believes he can deal with something like that. Because I dare say that this thing is as strong as Kyuubi. But does anyone feel surprise at her presence? Tobarama asked. She was there the whole time, watching the battle, yet no one seems to notice her. Yes, they must be focusing in fighting the dragon, but don't you think it's a bit weird? The Nadaime Hokage looked around. Plus, with her expression and the way she is carrying herself, I don't think she is a normal kid. He's right, Jiraiya nodded. Other than the fact that she is freaking cute, I believe there is something fishy about this girl. Let's continue, Oji-sama. Tsunade turned to her father, who nodded and returned his attention to the book. ROOOOOAAARRRR. The black dragon roared angrily and stomped its hands onto the ground, knocking the members of Fairy Tail away as if they were mere flies. The Dragon King spread its wings and took off to the sky before looking down at the island and opened its jaw, sousing in a mass amount of air strongly. He is going to breathe fire. I feel something nastier than just fire coming. Hashirama said as everyone held their breath, as the climax of the battle was approaching. Awa! Natsu cried, falling on top of Lucis' back and was blown back several feet. Is everyone alright? Urza asked loudly as she got up from the ground. At this race, there is no chance for them to win. These guys are really tough, aren't they? Kiba said while the rest of the Rookie 9, as well as Team Guy agreed. Is it strange to say that they remind me of Naruto? Definitely not, Kiba. Definitely not. Tsunade chuckled with a shake of her head. Yep. Guys like that are really hard to kill. None of our attacks are working at all, Elfman said through gritting teeth, his sister standing beside him, forced to deactivate her Satan soul form. Holy! Jiraiya cursed out with blood flowing down his nose while the males around him just gasped like a fish with a blushing face when the screen flashed, showing the image of Elfman's sister. She was a slim young woman of below average height. She had long, white hair which curled slightly at the ends, with two bangs framing her face and reaching down to her chest. Her hairstyle's most distinctive trait was a short, upward ponytail obtained by gathering and tying the hair covering her forehead. She had large blue eyes and a curvy, voluptuous body, with large breasts. Her attire was a shot white dress that was tied together in front of her chest, and there was some bandages wrapped around her arms and legs, showing that she was injured. But it didn't make her any less beautiful in everyone's eyes. It's not fair, Kushina whined with a little jealousy in her voice. How can these girls be so beautiful and attractive? Well, I believe human has evolved in a way that we had never though before. Tsunade pointed out, Urza, Lucy, Mirajan, all three of them are really beautiful. And guess what? All three of them have very large breasts. Jiraiya cheered excitedly with his thumbs pointing up. I love the future. He cried. Ignore him, he's always like that anyway. Tsunade shook her head in disappointment. He didn't change, even after his death. This thing isn't using the strength it used when it fought me. Gildart thought as he gritted his teeth, looking up at Aknologia, it's just playing with them. Seriously, Kiba shouted in shock, and Mirajan seems like she's injured even before the fight. I don't know if the others are in the same condition as hers, but if they are, their chance of winning is even smaller than before. Neji admitted, with a shake of his head. Fairy Guardian, please hurry. It's a breath attack. Gajeel shouted when he saw energy began to swirl around Aknologia's mouth. Yep, probably something even nastier than fire. Hashirama nodded in agreement at his previous words. Is it planning on blasting the whole island away? Kana asked in shock. The entire island? Minato asked in shock. Holy, this dragon must be really powerful if it can do something like that with one single attack. He hated it when he was right about the villains. Compared to the thing we fight in the fourth Shinobi world, it's still weaker, but power like that is truly terrifying. Let's just hope that this fairy guardian is strong enough to fight that creature. No way. Seriously. Everyone who can use defensive magic, put the power you've got into it, now. Urza ordered, pointing back to her group. Right. Wendy nodded. Another cute girl. Jiraiya giggled. The women are hot, the little girl's so cute, the future is awesome. Now is clearly not the time for that, Jiraiya. Tsunade shook her head and had the urge to punch him in the face, but decided to hold back for later when he did something really pervert. There's not enough time to draw the seals, Freed muttered. Oh, so there are seal masters around. Kushina said, but I doubt there are anything other than the Shisekyojin is strong enough to block an attack at that scale, and power. And I doubt any of them could use such technique. The others nodded their head in agreement. There's plenty of defensive magic that does not require writing symbol or seals, Levi said hurriedly, sweats pouring down her forehead. By now anyone could feel the vast amount of magic Aknologia was emitting, even from there. Everyone, focus all your magical energy on Fried, Lizanna shouted. Oh, with that hair color, she must be Myra's sister then. Everyone, let's join hands together. Mirajan Strauss said and offered her hands to the nearest person, her brother, as he took it. We can't let it end here. Natsu cried and grabbed Lucis' hand, his other hand quickly took Urza's hands into his. Okay, we'll never give up, Lucy shouted, as tears flowing from her eyes. Everyone, join your power together as one. Gray also joined in, holding Juvia and Lucis' hands as Fairy Tail stood in a circle. Everyone just sat there silent and waited patiently for the Hokage to continue. Laxus turned to his grandfather and offered him his hand, smiling softly to the tiny old man whose body was shaking, looking at his children in absolute shock. He considered them his children. Sarutobi smiled. Dear Kami, don't let anything happen to these people. Some of the people prayed, wishing for the best to happen and the tide to change. Worse things always happen to the best kind of people. Minato smiled and squeezed his wife's hand comfortingly. Then, gently he put his hand in Laxus' much bigger hands, a smile made it to his face. We'll all go home together, he said. Fairy Tail stood in a circle as magical energy flared up around them. To Fairy Tail, they cried out all at once, looking up at Aknologia, who then unleashed his breath in a gigantic blast. The whole sky lifted up as the massive attack of Apocalypse approached them. The whole Tenro Island shook violently at the amount of magic released by the Black Dragon. Facing their death, and believe in each other till the end, Hashirama said quietly with a sad voice, these people will forever have my respect. The other shinobi nodded, a few kunoichi quietly sobbed for them. Mavis opened her eyes and smiled softly. You came, after all, she whispered softly. Yeah, eh? The Raikage grinned and shouted as the whole alliance of shinobi cheered out loudly in excitement, about damn time. Looks like the tide has changed. Tobirama nodded his head, being the only one who was keeping his cool around. Man, what a bunch of noisy brats. And I thought this fairy dude will have a better personality than this. Kiba shook his head and groaned out with a hint of disappointment in his voice. But at least he'll save them, and this is the story about him after all. Ino said while leaning her head against Sai's shoulder, right? Sai-kun. Yeah. The former root shinobi nodded his head with a smile. Let's just hope that he's not an emo like Sasuke-kun. The crowd roared out in laughter while the Uchiha only caught into his hand and signaled for the first Hokage to continue. Every single member of Fairy Tail's eyes snapped wide open at that lazy and unfamiliar voice. Looking up, all gasped in shock when they saw a young man standing on the sky, with his back facing them, looking up at the dragon and the dragon's roar approaching them. But what shocked them the most was that his body was glowing, as if it was coated in pure orange energy. He was wearing a long, energy-like high-collar cloak with strange black markings on his back. Excuse me. Tobirama suddenly raised his hand and said, with a kind of tone they had never heard from him before, even his brother, is it just me, or that man's appearance sounds a little familiar? Don't tell me. Everyone widened their eyes in shock after realizing what it was all about. But it's impossible. Kakashi shook his head and said with a serious tone, this is the future we're talking about, several thousand years in the future, there is no way he is going to be there. There is only one way to find out. Minato nodded his head at his student and turned to look at the first Hokage. Hashirama nodded his head and read. A giant head made of pure raw energy then materialized around his body before the whole body of a gigantic beast appeared, with the same black markings on its body and 9 tails moving behind it like wildfire. The beast itself was big, maybe even bigger than Aknologia himself, greatly resembled a fox with 9 tails. No way. Kushina gasped in shock with her hands covered her mouth, hoping it was not who she thought, but the image on the screen was clearly telling her otherwise. The whole stadium fell into silence as they stared at the flat-screen TV, which was showing the image of a young man with spiky golden hair, standing inside the massive jaw of a beast with his hand raised, palm facing away from him in pure shock. It was Naruto Uzumaki, several millenniums, and yet he didn't look a day older than he currently was. Impossible. But he should be dead. They all knew that the person that even came close to immortality was Orochimaru, but his way of achieving it was nasty, and they couldn't think about or imagine their Naruto doing such thing just like the snake Sannin. There must be a logical explanation for this. Tobirama refused to believe it and urged his brother, please continue. One of his hand raised and the 9 tails fox opened its mouth, small black, white and red orb began to appear and gather together to make a massive black sphere, as big as or even bigger than Aknologia's breath attack. Bijudama. Minato nodded his head, still in a state of shock as seeing his son still alive and well after all that time. It's alright Kushi-chan, he's going to be alright. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder and gave her a comforting hug. Kushina could only nod her head, but still wasn't any less worried for her son. My job here is done, the young man said and shot the massive orb straight to Acnologia's roar. From now, is yours, Mavis. Wow, he sounds so mature. A lifetime is enough to make a man to become wise. Hashirama made a small smile at Ino's statement. Naruto, on the other hand, must have gone through several lifetimes. If he's really an immortal, then it's not that much of a surprise. I understand, the first master of fairy tale said and closed her eyes. Two attacks collided on midair, creating a powerful explosion that shook the entire sea area. Its shockwave knocked the boat of the spectators back with large and strong wave. Acnologia cried out in pain as the shockwave crashed into its body, launching it toward the sky with no hope to regain the control of its balance. Everyone gasped in awe, but then it was turned into shock when the TV showed an image of a massive hole in the middle of the ocean, with few destroyed lands around it. And that is the end of this chapter. Hashirama announced before closing the book and gave it to his student, the Sandaime Hokage of the Leaf, who offered to read next. Silence soon fell over the shinobi and kunoichi that were present within the place. Neither of them could believe that their beloved knucklehead blonde had become an immortal, and was still alive several thousand years in the future. There must be a perfect explanation for this. The Nadaime Hokage, Tobarama Senju, was the only person that was still refusing to acknowledge it, trying to come up with a more logical explanation for Naruto's presence in the future. I refuse to believe this. The white-haired man shook his head. Tobarama, as far as we can see, there is no other way for him to appear in the future like that. His brother said with a serious tone, unlike his usual playful, unless there is a magic that can transport people from the past to the future, but we're talking about many thousand years here, I doubt there is someone strong enough to summon someone like Naruto. Around him, many people nodded their head in agreement. Years after the war, Naruto had become so powerful that they doubted anyone other than Sasuke would be able to hold their ground against him. But, how can he become immortal? Kushina spoke up with a worried tone, as Uzumaki is well known for our strong life force, but strong enough to archive immortality, that is something unthinkable. She shook her head. We can only answer that question by reading on, Kushina. Minato said, I believe, whatever is going to happen to our son, will be revealed in this book. Kushina bit her bottom lips before nodding her head. It was her right to be impatient. She had never gotten the chance to care for Naruto like Minato did when Orochimaru brought him back during the climax of the Fourth Shinobi War, and then as soon as she heard about him she suddenly learned that he was going to become an immortal. I will start reading, the Sandaime said, and everyone soon fell into silence. 7 years had passed since the day Tenryujima was taken down by Acnologia, bringing the top strongest mages of fairy tale down to the deepest part of the sea with it. I still can't believe young Naruto managed to defeat away something that was as strong as Kurama, like it's just another walk in the park. Hashirama shook his head, having witnessed and fought against Kyuubi before. I don't know with that level of power should we call him the second Rakuto Sennin or not. Time is the only thing that is holding us ninja back. Tobarama stated calmly, if Naruto is really an immortal, then he has all the thing he needs to grow stronger and stronger. Fairy tale, from the strongest guild of Fury. So, the world is now called Fury? Sakura asked in interest. Or, Fury is the name of a continent. Tsunade smiled at one of her disciple, and Fairy Tail is its strongest guild. I wonder if this guild system works like Ninja Village. I highly doubt that. Jiraiya shook his head. Had become the lowest, weakest guild without its core members. I wonder what were they doing on that island. Onoki spoke up for the first time. And they're all injured beforehand. His granddaughter, Kuratsuchi, said as they could all remember the state Miragen was in when she fought against Acnologia. Surely something did happen before Acnologia arrived and attacked them. They barely got any new mission requests, even losing their guild building to the new guild in Magnolia Town, Twilight Ogre, forcing the remaining members of Fairy Tail to move out of the town. Must have sucked for them. Kiba chuckled and everyone nodded their head in agreement. But it would soon change because deep underneath the sea, most of Tenryujima remained unscratched. I wonder what happened to the people on Tenro, Kushina said. With Naruto there, I don't think he is going to let anything bad happen to them, right? She turned to her husband and asked hopefully. Of course he is, Kushina. Minato nodded his head. Of course he is. Wrapped protectively inside a giant sphere with the symbol of fairy tale on the surface. A sphere. Must be a seal or a barrier to protect them. Kakashi replied to his student's question. Remember, when Acnologia's attack in Naruto's Bijudama collided, a powerful explosion was made. Its shockwave was more than enough to blast a massive dragon that can fly into the sky without any control, and it was just the shockwave, not the heat and power unleashed from the explosion. Surely the island won't be able to handle something like that. Inside, the core members of the guild was sleeping, as time seemingly didn't move in there. 7 years and yet they didn't age a single day, all thanks to the magical sphere that protected them and the mysterious young man who stopped most of Acnologia's attack. The shinobi and kunoichi all gasped in awe after hearing about such powerful and magical protection spell. Even the ones who knew and learned about Uzumaki's Fuinjutsu Act, known for being the strongest sealing art in the world, like Kushina or Minato, was totally speechless and found themselves in a state of shock. Then suddenly, a paper with unfamiliar handwritings appeared on midair before landing on the book on Sarutobi's hands. The Sandaime picked it up, giving it a quick read and started reading it out loud for everyone to hear. Fairy is one of the 3 great fairy magic, distinct to the Fairy Tail Guild. He read, a spell which converts Fairy Tail members' bonds and faith into magic power. The spell protects the guild from any evil, an absolute defense magic, powerful enough to defend against even time. However, the sphere acts as a stasis chamber, a place in which time stops, thus everyone within the sphere is stuck in a frozen state in which they don't age. Holy! Jiraiya cried in shock, that is some extremely powerful spell right there. Wait a second. Sakura raised her hand up to stop everyone from talking. Time is frozen in that sphere. Do you think that it has something to do with Naruto's presence in the future? It was a more logical way to explain the biggest question, but before any new opinions could be voiced, surprisingly, Tobirama spoke up with a shake of his head. I doubt that, child. He said, it will take a lot of time, probably no less than a couple of thousands years for chakra, ninjutsu to disappear, or at least forgotten and replaced with a new kind of power. Even if Fairy Sphere, or at least a spell with the same power, is one of the first spells that is going to be created, Naruto will have to live for more than 10 lifetimes for that to happen. Everything is leading to the fact that he is indeed an immortal. It was hard for him to accept it, but when every logical explanation had been eliminated, then the illogical would be the truth. I see. Sakura nodded her head in understanding. 3 great fairy magic. Jiraiya decided to change the topic back to the story, spoke up, if Fairy Sphere is that powerful, you can't help but imagine just how powerful the other 2 spells are. Around him, the alliance couldn't help but nod their heads in agreement. And if I wasn't mistaken, that spell was casted by a little girl. Tsunade chuckled before turning to her teacher. Please continue, Sarutobi-sensei. However, unlike the mage of Fairy Tail, there was one single person within the sphere that was still awake. Naruto. Even though time didn't pass within the glowing orb, and to him, it was just a few seconds after Mavis created the sphere. Only a few seconds. Kakashi's eyes widened in surprise. And that is some seriously ridiculous powerful spell. Jiraiya shook his head with a small chuckle. He could still feel the time around him pass lazily. Seriously, just how powerful this kid can possibly become? Tsunade asked out loud. And that young man was lying on the ground with both hands behind his head, looking at the sea outside the sphere with his eyes half lifted, a bored expression on his face. Well, sound familiar? Ino giggled slyly as she turned her head to look at her most lazy teammate, who groaned and scratched the back of his head with his eyes half lifted. Shikamaru, I think you rubbed him with your laziness. Asuma chuckled mirthfully while patting his student's back. At this, everyone chuckled at Shikamaru, who muttered something under his breath before saying his trademark words, troublesome. He was a handsome young man around the age of 19 to 20, with spiky blonde hair and bright azure blue eyes, 3 whisker marks on each cheek. He was also rather tall and has a lean, yet muscular build. He was wearing a black uniform-style jacket with an orange zipper that features several buttons on the waist and sleeves, allowing him to fold up the left sleeve and rear coattails, giving him easy access to the pouches on the back of his belt. He wore a red armband with the crest of Fairy Tail on his left arm. Most the kunoichi, married or not, blushed brightly when they finally saw Naruto's appearance from the scene. Kushina, meanwhile, smiled at her son with pride and leaned on Minato's shoulder. Such a fine young man he has become, hasn't he, Minato? Kushina said softly, and the yellow flash of Konoha couldn't stop himself from nodding in agreement at his wife's words. I do have a feeling that we will have a Casanova here. Kiba whispered to his teammate, Shino, who only nodded his head. 2 whales, the young man muttered, mostly to himself, mating season already. He wondered out loud. He then yawned loudly and then blinked twice when he saw the first master of Fairy Tail stood above him. Wait, hold on. Ino decided to interfere as she suddenly noticed something very strange. In the first chapter, it was stated that Makarov-san was the 3rd master of Fairy Tail, while Mavis is the 1st master of Fairy Tail. Then, everyone widened their eyes at that revelation. Could it be that she's an immortal too? Tenten asked. I believe we'll find out soon enough. Looking down at him with a smile, you're blocking the sun, Mavis. You do know that we're underneath the sea, Naruto. The first guild master smiled at him. We can't see the sun here, it was actually kind of dark inside the sphere. He changed, didn't he? Sasuke asked, closing his eyes. Indeed, there is many differences in the way he talks and carries himself. Kakashi nodded with an eyes smile. Time can do many things, even to the loudest kind of people. Tobirama nodded his head with a smile. The cloud as well, Naruto chuckled, closing his eyes. How long? 7 minutes, Mavis said with her head titled to the side. 7 minutes for 7 years, those brats, bond is really something. Naruto nodded his head, good for them. So, the stronger the bond, the greater the sphere. Minato nodded his head. 7 minutes for 7 years, from the way Naruto is saying that, I can tell that their bond is something very impressive. It's not just magic that is magical, Hashirama smiled. The bonds and faiths of Fairy Tail are becoming stronger and stronger with each generation, Mavis said softly, closing her eyes. All of those thoughts allowed one of the 3 great fairy magic, Fairy Sphere, to be activated. Their will and faith of each other become an absolute defense magic. It has become such a wonderful guild. You know, I have the same feeling when I first heard about Konoha after all those years. Hashirama smiled brightly as he looked at the next generation of his Pride Village, the ones that inherited the will of fire and would soon pass it down to the next generation of Leaf Shinobi and Kunoichi. It is, Shadaime-sama, it is. The Sandaime Hokage smiled before continuing his reading. Good for them. Naruto smiled and repeated his words before sitting up. Hey Mavis, there. But his eyes widened in surprise when the spirit of the 1st master of Fairy Tail wrapped her arms around his neck. Thank you, Naruto, for protecting them, she whispered softly. Even though Mavis was just a spirit, she couldn't touch him, but he could still feel the warmness from her. Ah, the kunoichi cooed warmly at such scene between Naruto and Mavis, which appeared on the flat scene TV to show it to everyone. Their similarities in hair and eyes colors made them look like biological brother and sister. Minato and Kushina also smiled, but inside they couldn't help but feel a little sad, wondering if they were alive and tried for another child, perhaps a daughter, would that be the scene that they would see every day? A spirit, so she is already dead then. Tobirama said to his brother, it's clear that she's not a spirit. Don't ruin the mood, Tobirama. Hashirama chuckled loudly, making his brother give him a glare. Hey, don't mention it. Naruto smiled and stood up, his shoulder passed through Mavis' ethereal body. There is a ship approaching, I think it's time you bring my island to the sea again, and he walks away. Line break. Natsu, get a hold of yourself. Jet and Droy said while trying to pull the pink-haired salamander from the ground, as half of his body was covered in earth. Boy. Natsu. Wake up, your bastard. Warren cried out. That's clearly not the way to wake someone up. The Godime Mizukage said while shaking her head. What? Shut up. Natsu roared and busted himself of the ground, ready to fight. Wah, I believe we have found another, pink-haired version of our current Naruto here. Jiraiya laughed loudly, a noisy brat who blindly fight first and think later. The closest people to Naruto, such as Kakashi and Iruka, nodded their head in agreement with a long sigh. Natsu. Wahh. Jet, Warren and Droy threw themselves on him with their arms wrapped around Natsu's neck, much to his shock. What the hell happened? The pink-haired boy wondered out loud. Why did you guys come here? He then widened his eyes in shock. And by the way, did you age a bit? And Droy got fat too. He cried out and pointed at the chubby boy standing next to Jet, his eyes as wide as dinner plates. 7 years did pass, after all. Minato chuckled. But to the people on Tenro, it's only 7 minutes, it must be a lot for them to handle once they got back to the civilization. You haven't changed at all, the three cried out of happiness with tears flowing down their cheeks. We just got attacked by Acnogolia. Then a golden guy came and turned into a massive fox with black markings, he said, trying to recall his memories. His eyes then snapped open. What about everyone else? He summarized everything in one sentence. Sakura chuckled nervously while everyone burst out in laughter. We really did have another version of Naruto here. I know, right? Jiraiya laughed. Right here, Mavis said softly, earning the attention from the group. Who are you? Droy asked in surprise. My name is Mavis, Fairy Tail's first master, Mavis Vermilion, she introduced, making the Fairy Tail group to cry out in absolute shock. I would probably do the same if I see a ghost. A random kunoichi said, and her friend nodded in agreement. She then slowly turned around and walked away, leading them to the spots where the other members of Fairy Tail were. The guild gathered in front of Mavis, with their eyes wide in surprise at the presence of Fairy Tail First Master, the one that was supposed to pass away a very long time ago. They also saw an unfamiliar young man lying on the ground at the other side of the rock Mavis was standing on, his hands clapped together behind his head, looking uncared about what the guild was saying. He changed a lot, Tsunade said in surprise. I don't think I can recognize him anymore. That wasn't just maturity, Tsunade. Tobirama shook his head at his grandniece. Time can do multi-things to people, especially when he is the only one who continued to live while the laws of nature take away everything he cares about. He made sure to say it with a low tone so only a few people could hear, because he didn't want to make Naruto's parents, especially his mother, to get more worry about him. What now? So the first protect us, Makarov said through tears, smiling at the young woman with long golden hair. No, I'm just an ethereal body. Since I converted everyone's strength into magic, I had to give it my all. Mavis smiled with her eyes closed. Unwavering faith and resilient bonds will bring even miracles to your side. She then looked at them and smiled with her head tilted to the side. It's becoming a wonderful guild, Sandame. That is some really wise words for someone so young. The Sandame Hokage said in surprise. During the time when he was still the Hokage of the Leaf and alive, only Itachi Uchiha had shown such wisdom when he was still very young. I don't think she is that young. Kakashi said. She is a spirit, after all. Naruto looked at the ground and smiled softly. This really brought back some memories about a certain old man that took care of him when he was young. Minato and Kushina both smiled at Hiruzen, who returned with a fatherly smile and a nod of his head. Young man, the third master of Fairy Tail turned to Naruto and asked with a kind tone, wasn't you the one who defended us against Acnologia's roar attack? He recognized his voice and his feature, even though he looked very different from how he was during Acnologia's released its roar attack. Yeah, appear like a god and defeat a dragon, way to go, Naruto. Kiba groaned out loudly at the thought. He turned and looked at them. Everyone was looking at him, their eyes widened slightly. Naruto wasn't surprised by this kind expression at all, since Acnogolia was currently one of the strongest beings here at Earthland, going toe-to-toe and even actually sent him away. Something that even a whole guild worked together still couldn't manage to do wasn't something that you would see every day. So, that dragon was one of the strongest around. Tobirama said. I clearly don't want to see the strongest. Yeah, so, Naruto spoke up. I thank you for what you had done, Makarov said, bowing his head low to Naruto. If it was not for you, we would save it. Naruto cut him off with an emotionless tone. Did you know that even without me take out most of that blast, Tenryujima would be still protected by Fairy Sphere? He then looked away. I didn't think that your bond would be strong enough to defend you, that's all. Did I really hear that right? Tenten gasped in surprise. He changed so much, didn't he? No matter how many times they asked that question, it would never get old. They could no longer recognize their beloved knucklehead hero. Hard to believe I would live to see this day. Asuma sighed longingly. For some reason, I think we got an emo version of Naruto now. A Naruto with Sasuke's personalities, who could have known? Jiraiya chuckled while shaking his head. Oi, what the hell do you mean by that? Natsu cried out. My, he is like the old Naruto. It's like seeing himself when he was younger. Hiruzen said with a smirk, as he remembered the times when Naruto was still running around the village, pulling pranks and going all happy with his cheerful personalities, despite the heat glares and cold shoulders the villagers gave him. Natsu, Lucy spoke up instantly, warning him. Can I ask what your name is? Urza asked calmly, stepping up a little. Why need to know? His name is Naruto Uzumaki, Mavis said cheerily with her eyes sparkled in excitement, and he is a mage of fairy tale too. They all gasped at Mavis' announcement. So I guess that is why he is going to be called Fairy Guardian. Kushina smiled fondly, because he protects them, the fairies. With the way he is now, I doubt it is going to happen again anytime soon. Way to bust the bubble, brat, Naruto said loudly. Awesome. Natsu cheered out in excitement, much to Naruto's amusement. We have someone as strong as you in our guild. You're a fairy tales mage. Laxus said in shock. He was after all one of the oldest member of the current younger generation, and yet he'd never seen Naruto before, and he was actually looked no older than him, maybe even younger, but I'd never seen you joining our guild before. I stay here most of my life, Naruto said shortly. Mavis taught me how to create a magical guild mark, so I make one. He grabbed a rock and threw it straight to the lake in front of him. It jumped on the water surface for a few times before sinking. It wasn't a lie, only part of the truth. A half-lie isn't a lie or the truth either. Tobirama said proudly, foreseeing the new generation wasn't as bad as he thought. By the time they realized what the guild mark capable of, they would start to question his power. There is something magical about that mark too. Probably there's some secret about it. Shino stoically replied to his teammate's question. I think it is understandable. The third master nodded his head. I think it's time for us to return to Fairy Tail, he said to his children, and Natsu cheered out while everyone smiled brightly. Naruto, do you want to come with us? A mage of Fairy Tail was a mage of Fairy Tail. No matter the way you joined or where you were the family member of each and every single other member of the guild. It's very wise of you to think that, Makarov Drayar, Hashirama said with a grin on her face. Fairy Tail really consider each other like family, don't they? No thank you, I'm alright but he stopped when he saw Mavis once again stood above him while looking down at him with interest eyes. What do you want, Mavis? The girl only smiled to him. You want me to come with them, don't you? He asked again. This time a tick mark appeared on his forehead. Mavis nodded her head rapidly. Sigh, alright then. He stood up and walked toward Fairy Tail. You can't refuse anything from such a cutie like her. Ino cooed excitedly. While the women nodded with her butt, most the men groaned, but unconsciously they couldn't help but agree. Line break. UGMH. As soon as the ship began to move, Natsu groaned with his hand covered his mouth as he stood at the sideline of the boat, his face green. Motion sickness. Natsu asked the nearest person standing next to him. Lucy, Dragon Slayer EH. Dragon Slayer. Kiba repeated in surprise. Excuse me, are you telling me that a Dragon Slayer couldn't kill a dragon? Seriously. That dragon is probably too powerful for any Dragon Slayers. Minato spoke up. But I do wonder, is motion sickness a unique trait of every Dragon Slayer? And from the look of it, it's rather bad. Kushina followed, making everyone chuckle lightly. So lame. A grumbled. Yes, she nodded her head before turning to the other Dragon Slayer. All of them are really bad with transportation, save for Wendy. That little blue hair is also a Dragon Slayer. Ino asked in shock. What the hell? Did she really slay a dragon before? I don't think that is the point. Young Yamanaka, the second Hokage, shook his head. I believe Dragon Slayer is something akin to a title, or at least, they are the mages that wield the power to slay a dragon. In our stories alone, dragon is a very powerful being, so there must be a special kind of magic to defeat. Naruto nodded, looking at the girl who was running back and forth using her magic to heal the injured member of Fairy Tail. A healer. Tsunade smiled along with her two students. Good thing that we still have them around. I didn't thank you for saving us, so, thank you. Like I said, no need for that. Naruto shook his head. Even without me, you guys would still get out alive anyway. Accept the credits, brat. Onoki groaned out. You deserve it. Around him, everyone nodded in agreement. But still, a frown made it to Lucy's face, but then she smiled. I'm still grateful for what you did. I'm Lucy Heartfilia. Nice to meet you. She offered him her hands. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto took it and shook Lucy's hands. You said you stayed on the island most of your life and joined there with the approval of the first. Lucy asked curiously, so, you never come to the guild before? Yeah. Naruto could only nod his head. What kind of magic do you use? I had never seen something quote, look, can we just stop this 10-question game? Naruto cut her off, making Lucy to look at him in surprise and walked away with his hands in his pocket. How rude. Kushina pouted at her son's action. But you have to admit being asked about your abilities like that can be annoying. It's best to keep the information for oneself just in case. Tobirama said. Keeping secrets from family and friends sussed, but it was the life ninjas had to live. How cold of him. Gray said. Appear next to Lucy. What's his problem anyway? I don't care. Where are you clothes? Lucy flinched and cried out in shock when she saw Gray stood next to her without a piece of clothes on his body. How did he manage to do that? He was with clothes on a few minutes ago. Everyone thought with a sweat dropped. Naruto walked to the end of the ship and looked at Tenryujima, the island that was his home after he decided to stay away from this world. He didn't know what Mavis was thinking, but she was a very wise girl and knew what was good for him. Like a wife. Jiraiya said while wiggling his eyebrows. No, like a sister. Tsunade corrected him, bringing her fist up to let him know that any pervert thought and it would connect with his face. And that is the end of this chapter. The Sandaime Hokage smiled. Who want to read next? He asked, looking around. I will, Sarutobi-sama. Minato offered his hand and took the book from his predecessor's hands. Minato opened the book and flipped to the third chapter before reading it out loud for everyone to hear. X791 Magnolia. X791. Kiba questioned with an amused tone as he turned to his teammate. It's a strange way to address a year, don't you think? The dark glasses, insects user Shinobi nodded his head in agreement. Can't help but wonder what happened 791 years ago. Hashirama spoke up before signaling for the fourth Hokage to read the book. By the time they came back from Tenro Island, 7 years had passed by in Earthland. I still can't believe the world is going to have such a powerful barrier like that. Kushina said. Being an Uzumaki, she understood Fuinjutsu better than Shinobi or Kunoichi within the place. She was the one who had learned and used countless powerful seals for combat purposes, and yet she couldn't help but feel amazed at the power of Fairy Sphere. A magic that covers everyone's bonds and faith into magic power. Sarutobi nodded his head, which alone can speak volume of how powerful bonds and faith are. Lucy looked around the guild and she couldn't help but smile a little. It felt like a fairy tale she read a long time ago, though she never thought she and everyone of the guild would end up in a situation exactly like that story. Wonder what story she is talking about. Ino mused. She got the feeling that she knew that story from the bedtime stories her mother used to tell her when she was a lot younger, but wasn't too sure, so the Yamanaka's heiress decided to keep it to herself. Last night, the guild got a massive party to celebrate the return of the core members of Fairy Tail, and even if she wanted to, Lucy would never be able to forget any moments of that night. Drinking, singing and dancing, as if they were making up for 7 years of lost time. Fairy Tail was no longer the best guild of Earthland, yet it was still pretty much the same as before. Everyone, laughing and smashing their fists into each other's face, before wrapping their arms around each other's shoulder, tears of joy falling down their eyes. Well, Jiraiya chuckled, that's a way of celebrating, isn't it? Everyone nodded his head in agreement and laughed at the thought of such party, where everything went chaos. They have 7 years to catch up to with each other, after all. Kakashi nodded with an eye smile. It might be only a few minutes for the core members of Fairy Tail, but for the rest in the world, it's 7 years straight. They must be really happy to meet each other again. But still, why do I have a feeling that there is a but In this, Sasuke spoke up and Sakura nodded her head in agreement. Everyone. Except for one only person. See. The Uchiha shrugged. It's Naruto, no doubt about it. Everyone nodded their head in agreement and Kushina looked at the book sadly, wondering if there was any way for her son to return to his current self she heard so much about from the others and her husband. Naruto Uzumaki once again at his personal space, completely separated from the other. He got a table for himself at a corner of the room. He didn't drink any cup of beer Mira gave him or try to interact with everyone, he just sat there, remained silent all night until the morning. Well shit, the emo level has reached a whole new level. Jiraiya gasped slightly in surprise before turning to look at Sasuke. Sorry kid, he really doesn't have your personalities, he has worse. Like I said, time could do a lot of things to people. Tobirama stated calmly, immortality does come with a price. You might live forever, but the ones you care about will pass away normally when their time comes. He must have lost all hope in the living. Mavis must have seen this. His brother, the first Hokage, continued after him before the atmosphere could become any worse. It must be the reason why she wants Naruto to come with Fairy Tail. Just look at them, the way they act around each other, the way they bond with each other. I believe if there are anyone out there, in the future, that can help Naruto to believe in other, it's Fairy Tail. Let's just hope that thing will swing that way. But most of the members of the guild were too lost into the fun to acknowledge the blonde, who also appeared to be very grateful if they don't try to. For someone who lived most his life seeking for attention, Iruka stated, it's like he has become a complete different person. Agree. Kakashi nodded his head. After all, he had been there to witness Naruto's growth, from a boy who wanted nothing more than being acknowledged by everyone, to the hero that the entire world came to love and respect. It saddened him to see his beloved student would turn out like that. The fun continued until the doors of the small guild building was opened and 5 very familiar faces walked in with a smile on their face. Welcome back, everyone. Sherry Blendy waved to them cheerfully. She was a young beautiful woman with blue eyes, pink hair, large braids, and a curvaceous body. She wore a black vest top and matching skirt. The vest sported a collar and tied reaching only to her mid-chest, and aside from a light cloth band clasped above her navel, her belly and the inside portion of her breast were exposed. She also wore a dark hair band with points resembling cat ears, and long black gloves reaching to her upper arms. Well, Jiraiya chuckled with a lecherous smile. Damn. He could only stare, with blood tricked down from his nose, at another amazing figure. Why are they so hot? Leave him. Tsunade sighed in defeat. While the way he was acting wasn't something she would approve, even in the next million years, he did a really good job in lightening up the mood and brought a laughter back to the alliance. Looks like it's turned back into a noisy guild. The one who said that was Leon Vastia. He was a slim young man of average height with a muscular and toned body. He had bluish silver hair, most of which were spiky strands that jut upwards on top of his head, except for some which are kept pointing down and partially cover the upper left part of his face. The boys are so dreamy, too. Some of the younger kunoichi squealed out in delight. Behind him were Juranikis, Yuka Suzuki and Toby Horhorda, all of them wearing a smile on their face as they greeted the mist mages of Fairy Tail. Okay, so maybe not all the boys. The men couldn't help but sweat drop at that. And when I thought their guy Sensei and Lee have the worst eyebrow possible. Tenten winced in disgust at large and long Yuka's eyebrow. You guys. Gray said in shock, standing up from his seat. Lamia scale, Lucy gasped. It had been a long time since she last saw them, as they were Fairy Tail's alliance during the battle against one of the strongest dark guild of Balam Alliance, Oracion Cease. So, bad guys and their not so little occasions will be still around in the future. A grumbled, tightening his hands into fists. Good thing that the kids are going to have each other back, unlike us a few years before the Fourth Shinobi War. Yeah, our villages didn't get along well before that, even during the final meeting before heading to war. Mei Terumi nodded her head in agreement. When we're searching for Tenro Island, Blue Pegasus and Lamia really helped us out, one of the guild's members informed them, forcing Gray to make a forced smile as lions smirk. Looks like we're in their debt now. Don't worry about it. Blue Pegasus made it out there first, but we have much more power, Leon smirked confidently. Who cares about that? Gray sweat dropped, saying uncaringly. Well, I do have a feeling that these two had quite a history with each other, haven't they? Well, in these past 7 years, we Lamia scale have climbed up to the number 2 guild in Fury, Sherry said with a smile, putting her hand to the above of her sizable chest. Too bad for you, Lucy-san. Only number 2? Kiba asked in surprise, so who is the number 1 then? Blue Pegasus. Nah, don't think so. Ino shook her head and Sakura nodded in agreement. So, does that mean number 1 is Blue Pegasus? Lucy asked. Of course not. Toby cried. There's no way that could happen. See. Kiba nodded while muttering something about woman and their institution under his breath. Settle down. Yuka calmed his friend with his usual expression. No, it's not Blue Pegasus. Well, enough about that. Jura nodded his head. What's important is that everyone is okay. His eyes then caught the young man who was sitting by himself at a corner of the guild hall, which was very strange considered what kind of a guild fairy tale was. So he couldn't help but ask, and who is that young man over there? I have never seen him before, have I? Damn, that place must be noisy all the time. Anko whispered in amazement. Yeah, only one person doesn't act like them and he's immediately noticed by the others. Kurenai agreed with her best friend. Our fairy tale was just that popular. They used to be the number 1 guild of Fury, didn't they? Immediately the guild became silent, uncomfortable silence, making the mages of Lamia scale widen their eyes slightly at that. Naruto, however, completely ignored the silence and continued to mind his own business, by closing his eyes and sitting completely still. Is he mediating? Jiraiya turned his head to ask Sasuke. The brat can use senjutsu, right? Maybe he's mediating and becoming one with nature. Completely still was the usual words he and the Sennin used whenever they were talking about senjutsu and natural energy, as well as the way to absorb it into one's body. Possible, but for what reason? Sasuke nodded his head and stated calmly, plus, I don't think Naruto needs to stay completely still to absorb natural energy anymore. He can go into that Sennin Modo almost instantly, can he? The Toad Sennin widened his eyes in surprise at that. Damn, that brat is quite something. He then turned to Kushina and gave her a thumb up. Good work, Kushina. He grinned broadly at her, and Kushina could only nod her head in response, but she did have a proud smile on her face. Did I say something wrong? Jura asked, looking around. No, not at all, Jura-san. Lucy shook her head with a nervous smile. It's just that Naruto is not very sociable. We met him on the island. Makarov spoke up. He was drinking a cup of beer. From what he told us, he had been staying there for quite some times now and joined Fairy Tail long ago. Oh, is that so? Leon nodded his head. This is kind of new, don't you think? He turned around and asked Sherry, who couldn't help but nod her head. He is just shy, that's all, Mira said with a small smile, holding a tray with a couple of cups of beer on top of it, though she wasn't too sure herself when she said that. Naruto. Shy. Iruka made a small laugh after that. I don't think Naruto's name and the word shy could ever go alongside with each other. Unless we're talking about Hinata. Kakashi pointed out with a slight chuckle. But Hinata is not that shy anymore. Sakura decided to defend her friend by stepping in the conversation between their sensei. Sure, she's still blushing around him, but she has some huge improvement in her confidence, you know. Oh, sorry. Kakashi laughed while scratching the back of his head. Don't mind me, Minato-sense, please continue. But he's super powerful. Natsu suddenly appeared in front of Lamia Scales group and said with a cheerful smile, he stopped a dragon breath attack by. But before he could finish that sentence, a table dashed on the ground suddenly appeared and slammed into him, sending the poor pink-haired boy across the room before crashing into the wall. Well, some of the ninja chuckled and smiled while Sakura was saying that. Guess who did that? How rude of him. Kushina huffed and crossed her arms on her chest. If I was there, I'm sure I will, but before his wife could go any further, Minato decided to carry on. All had turned to the other side of the room and saw Naruto standing there with his feet raised a little. After seeing him sitting for all night and all day in the same position, this of course was a surprise for the Fairy Tail's members. The bastard will make a fine hermit someday, won't he? Kiba laughed. But he knew that Naruto could no longer age to the age he could become a full of experience old geezer. I would like to keep that information for myself, thank you very much. A true shinobi. Tobirama nodded his head firmly. After that many years, I see that he's still carrying the legacy of our era. Well, Hashirama looked at his brother for a second before turning to Minato. Ignore him, carry on Yondaime. Tobirama could only make a face at his older brother's words. He spoke up with a lazy tone, putting the picture he was holding into his pocket. Everyone couldn't help but look up in interest at the mention of that picture, and couldn't stop wondering who was on that picture he was keeping with him. He grabbed another free table and pulled it toward him, putting both of his feet on it and leaned back slightly against his chair. What? Naruto asked when he saw that everyone was looking at him. How cold. Ino shuddered at the thought of a Naruto like that, especially after she had spent so many years getting used to the cheerful and hot-headed Naruto. Sigh. You get the idea, Makarov said to Jura, of all the kids in Fairy Tail's younger generation, which he believed Naruto to be a part of them since he didn't look any older than 19. Wait, Minato. Kushina held up her hand to signal her husband to stop before speaking up. Naruto's 19 now, right? She asked worriedly, and many people widened their eyes in realization. So, it's going to happen in a few months or weeks? Sakura asked in shock. I don't think so. Hashirama suddenly spoke up after spending some time thinking about it. Remember that Uzumaki's life force is very powerful. Naruto could look 19 for 20 years, 30 years, or maybe more. I met Mito when she was 50-year-old, and she didn't look a day older than mid-20s. Don't worry, Kushina. Minato squealed his wife's hand and said comfortingly, our son is going to be alright. He can take care of himself, you know. But his words didn't make the red-haired woman any less worry for her son, and could only nod in response so her husband could carry on with the story. The blonde was the hardest to read and to understand. If he didn't know any better, he would think that Naruto wasn't a part of their guild, and didn't want to be a part of it. But he trusted the first's decision. After all, she was one of the founders of Fairy Tail, a very wise young woman. If she said Naruto was Fairy Tail's mage, then Naruto was Fairy Tail's mage. Now I really want to meet this girl. Tsunade spoke in amazement. She just seems to be too smart for her age, don't you think? She was one of the founders of Fairy Tail, and while she's simply a spirit, she could create one of the most powerful barrier we have ever seen. Tobirama nodded his head at his grandniece's words, not to mention even Naruto, an immortal who lived many thousands years, in the last chapter made a compliment about her wisdom. I believe that she can also see into his heart, and realize the person he truly is as well. Sarutobi said after his predecessor, a fearsome young woman, isn't she? To most people, fearsome was still a huge understatement. After that, Lamia Scale left Fairy Tail and everyone soon returned to drink with each other. There is a line break right here. Minato informed them before continuing. Beer. Mira walked up to him and asked cheerily. At first when she brought those cups to him, she didn't say anything to him because she afraid that he would get angry or something like that, but now when he finally talked something, even if it was just a few words, she could comfortably communicate with him. What a bastard. Kiba commented. I would definitely ask a girl like that out if she invited me for a drink. Well, I would like to see you try, Mutt boy. His sister, Hannah, teased him with a pat on the back. So, barely a week there and he already has a fan. Jiraiya giggled perversely. Good for him then. I don't think Mira is that type of girl, Jiraiya. Tsunade showed her former teammate her fist, daring him to make any comment or objection. Suna is right. Hashirama nodded his head with a smile. I think she's also a bartender or waitress or something like that. Quote. No thank you, Naruto replied shortly, making the smile on Mira's face disappeared. That's not how you talk to a girl, Naruto. Kushina groaned, holding her head at the way Naruto was acting. What an asshole. One of the shinobi from Kumo spoke up, and many agreed with him. Oh, then, would you like to drink anything? Instantly the smile returned to her face and she tried to make him open up once again. You must be thirsty. Naruto turned to Mira and stared at her for a moment before sighing. With just a glance he could tell that Mira would never stop bothering him until she got what she wanted. Finally, Naruto's mother smiled, exhaling a long breath she didn't know she had been holding. A cup of water should be fine, Naruto said, and Mira smiled brightly at that. She quickly ran away and found an empty cup to get Naruto some water. Excited, isn't she? You don't drink. Gildart spoke to Naruto, following Mira's example of trying to interact with him. Not that I have anything against it, but you don't seem like the clean type boy to me, young man. Oh hell no. Kiba shook his head with a wide smirk. That guy drink, and he can hold his liquor very well. The shinobi of his generation, including Choji, nodded their head in agreement, as they could remember the last time they saw Naruto drink. The Akamichi once challenged Naruto for a drinking contest, but it didn't end well for him because Naruto was completely fine no matter how many cups of sake he drank during that contest. It's because of the Kyuubi, or Kurama. Kushina explained. Jinchuriki cannot get drunk because their Biju's chakra increase the metabolic rate to at least 4 or 5 times stronger than normal human, so the alcohol cannot affect us unless we drink 5 times faster than usual. Oh, his daughter, however, was completely opposite, because she was drinking from a whole barrel of beer, holding her liquor even better than him, her father. Bad luck for him then. Asuma chuckled while smoking on his cigar. A whole barrel, Shizune said in shock. She's even worse than Tsunade-sama. The Godime huffed and turned her head away, crossing her arms beneath her gigantic chest, and chose to ignore her assistant's words. I drink, yes, Naruto said, taking the cup of water from Mira, but to me, beer the same as a cup of water. Point is, I can't get drunk, so what is the point of drinking in the first place? Well, we can enjoy the taste, actually. Yugito, the former Jinchuriki of Nibi no Nekomata, spoke up for the first time. Naruto said shortly and gulped down the water in one gulp. Thank you. He handed it back to the beautiful white-haired girl. What's your name, by the way? That's right, ask her name and flirt with her brat. Jiraiya giggled perversely. Next thing we know it, he'll bed this girl for sure. Geez, he has a girlfriend, you know. Tsunade scolded. I'm Mira, Mirajan Strauss. Mira introduced herself with a smile. Take over magic? Naruto asked, making Mira widen her eyes in surprise before nodding her head. Demons, I suppose. Interesting, the Nadaime Hokage thought while everyone listened on. You can tell. Makarov asked in interest. He was sitting on the table beside Naruto's with a cup of beer in his hands. The third master of fairy tale was pretty drunk, but he was still in the right mind to acknowledge the surrounding, about everyone's magic. So, I suppose that each one of them has their own magic. Sarutobi said. Natsu and Wendy use dragon-slaying magic, Freed uses magic that can create seal and barrier, and Myra's magic has something to do with demon. Interesting, isn't it? It's like their own bloodline limit or something like that. Hashirama grinned. Wonder what the others' magic are. Said Onoki. No, only Mira here, Naruto said. I can feel their emotions, the demons, emotion, coming from her. Of course, since demons aren't the friendliest ones, it is actually hard not to notice such a negative emotion coming from a cheerful young woman. She has demons living inside her. Kushina gasped in surprise. You don't think she's a Jinchuriki or something like that, don't you? Tenten asked worriedly, knowing full well how hard and horrible the life of a Jinchuriki was. I doubt that. Tobarama shook his head. Her magic is called takeover magic, so she must have the power to completely take over the demons, both mentally and physically, and use their power to fight. It was quite a magical magic, indeed. I see, Minato said before returning to the book. You can sense emotions. Gildart asked in surprise. Come to think of it, what is your magic anyway? Before Naruto could answer, Natsu suddenly leapt toward him with his fist covered in fire, trying to punch Naruto on the face. Naruto, however, already saw this coming and moved his head back a little, avoiding Natsu's punch at the last moment, making the pink-haired dragon slayer's fist to collide with the table. The hell is wrong with him? Kiba cried out in shock. Oi, don't go around attack people like that. Most of the members of Fairy Tail screamed out in a dramatic manner, pointing their hands at Natsu. I take that it happens pretty often then. Kakashi mused, while scratching his chin, appearing to be deep in thought. He's just like a mini, pink-haired version of Naruto. Tsunade sighed while shaking her head, as she could still remember how immature her godson was when he was younger. Natsu, Urza said out loudly with a stern tone, What do you think you are doing? Lucy already told me that you don't want to tell us your magic. Natsu stood up, punching his palm with fire flared around his body, grinning with a confident expression on his face. So I guess I will just have to force you to spill it out then. He pointed at Naruto. I challenge you to a fight, he declared proudly. At least he could say that before trying to punch him. Kushina pointed out. Do first, talk later. Sakura giggled softly. Sound familiar, guys? The rookie nine all busted out in laughter immediately after that. Nah, not interest, was Naruto's answer to the challenge. With the way Naruto was, no one was surprised by his reply and even expecting him to make in response like that. What? Natsu roared out. I'm challenge you right here. Not even Urza answered it like that. Even though she always win, Happy added in with his trademark gesture. Well, at least we have some capable girl around to keep that kind of boy in check. Tsunade smiled fondly, and many kunoichi nodded their head in agreement. Okay then. Natsu roared and his magic flared powerfully. I will force you to fight me then. And charged at Naruto, who only turned his head to look at Natsu. Well, I don't think he is going to dodge. Tobirama said. With that kind of opponent, Naruto can easily take him out by overwhelming his will to fight. Just wait for it. Even though Urza and even Makarov wanted to stop Natsu from attacking another guildmate inside of the guild, which was already too small for a fight in the first place, they couldn't help but hold their breath and try not to blink in order to fully see what Naruto would do. They all agreed that the young man over there was powerful, too powerful for someone so at his age. Not even Gildart, the ace of fairy tale, could match a corner of the power of the mighty Dragon King, and yet Naruto managed to send the beast away and negated one of its strongest attacks with his own. Little did they know that the rest of the guild was also thinking the same, especially the one who was there to witness his power. Then suddenly, when Natsu's fist was about to collide with Naruto's face, the pink-haired boy suddenly stopped dead in his track. Smooth. Kiba grinned. I don't want to admit it out loud, but hate to be in that pink-haired guy's shoe. There is nothing to be ashamed about, young Inuzuka. Hashirama smiled. Silence. Before their eyes widened in shock when Natsu began to sweat uncontrollably, his eyes slowly widened and fear made it to his face, as if he just saw something terrifying. Why you? Natsu stuttered before he collapsed to his knees. Poor guy, Kiba smirked, hopefully he isn't going to shit his pants right there. He must be a hot-headed boy, but I don't think he is that weak-minded Kiba. Kurenai said to her student and placed a hand on his shoulder. He fought against a dragon after all. Like I said, Naruto turned back to his table, saying lazily as Natsu put a hand on his chest, trying to catch his breath, not interest. He defeated Natsu by staring at him. Jet gasped in shock. What the hell? Gray muttered in shock. So it has never happened before? Sakura asked in surprise. Well, I really doubt that, was the only reply she got. Gildart gulped slightly at that. He didn't know what Naruto just do, but clearly it was more than enough to put the incredible brave salamander of fairy tale down to his knees, something that had only happened once before when he decided that he would no longer go easy on him. From Naruto, he didn't even feel a slight burst of magical energy nor he saw his body move, all he did was sit there and, like Jet said, stared at Natsu. Have enough yet? Naruto asked, glancing down the spot where Natsu was at. You're strong. The Dragon Slayer of Fairy Tale said with a wide smirk, glancing up to Naruto, but I won't lose to you. Oh ho, that's some gut he has there. The first Hokage said excitedly, with a large smile on his face. This boy is quite something, isn't he? He has gut, and the will to never give up. Jiraiya smiled fondly with a nod of his head, just like our Naruto. Ho! Everyone widened their eyes when they saw Naruto's lips curled up a little in a small smirk, the first expression they had ever seen on him other than emotionless and laziness. Nice eyes you got here, kid. Kid? Natsu asked before exploding. What the hell do you mean, kid? I'm no older than you, bastard. But he was immediately held back by Lucy and Gray. So, Lucy must be like a bustier Sakura-chan, and Gray is a friendlier and more youthful version of Sasuke-kun. Lee said while scratching his chin, causing both Sakura and Sasuke to glare at him for comparing them like that. Well, Team 7 assembled. Now we only need Kakashi-sensei in the team as well. Shut up, Natsu. Urza appeared next to him and quickly knocked him out, with a punch to the head. Grabbing the scarf of the unconscious boy, she turned to Naruto and said with an apologetic tone, "My deepest apology, Naruto, he is rather immature for his age. And we have a rather violent version of Kakashi-sensei right there as well." Everyone's sweat dropped while Kakashi could only laugh nervously. More like Tsunade, if you ask me. Jiraiya whispered to Minato and Kushina, who clearly didn't know how to respond. "Don't worry, the kid reminded me of myself when I was young." "You have no idea, Naruto." Naruto shook his head, the smirk on his face turned into a small smile. "He got gut and will, that's all he needs to grow strong." So true. Though, a certain snake-faced Sanin wouldn't agree to that. Naruto Uzumaki turned out to be more mysterious than they thought. Minato read before announcing, "Well, that's the end of this chapter, who want to read next?" Kakashi raised his hand and accepted the book from his teacher. "That was a very interesting chapter. We got to learn so much about the future." Hashirama smiled fondly at the thought of Fairy Tail and their strong bond. "I can't wait to see more." "We will, Shadaime-sama." His student, the Sandaime Hokage, said with a nod of his head, "I believe that's the reason we're here, to learn about Fairy Tail and young Naruto's journey with them. But I don't think we can call him young anymore." Asuma shook his head, sighing heavily. "I hope they'll be able to change him." Kushina said softly, "I don't want Naruto to continue to act like this." "No one does, Kushina." Minato held his wife's hand. "Let's just listen to the next chapter, shall we?" The red-head Uzumaki looked at her husband before nodding her head. And with that, Kakashi started reading. Fairy Tail. Makarov stepped out of his office with a mission request in his hands. "We have a new mission." The mages bellow, save for Naruto cheered out loudly from hearing the announcement from the guild master. "So, they still accept missions just like us?" Jiraiya nodded his head. "The system is not that much different, it seems." "Yes, but I don't think these kind of people will be willing to take the most serious requests, like assassinations," Tobirama stated calmly. Because of the absence of the core members of Fairy Tail, the guild was dethroned from the number 1 position a few years ago and became the weakest guild among the mage guilds of Fury. "Ah, I get it," Mei Terumi said, smiling. "They're having the same problem as we were before I took the position of Godime Mizukage. Because of the Bloody Mist reputation, only the worst kinds of missions were sent to us, and we rarely had anything to do back at those days. It was really hard for us to keep our income, so I understand." Akunoichi of the Mist, who had gone through the bloody era of her village, commented her thoughts out loud. "I hope they will start doing fine from now on, now that the core members are back." It was Ino who said that, and Sakura nodded in agreement. Missions were rarely sent to Fairy Tail nowadays, especially missions from A class and S class with high payments. Even the old ranking system is still there. Tsunade was surprised. From the lowest and easiest D rank mission, to the hardest and highest S class mission. The second Hokage concluded, "So I assume there are rankings among the mage as well. It's not like the weak and inexperienced mage can take on top class missions, can't they?" Most of the remained missions were finished by Team Natsu. Team Natsu. Jiraiya chuckled. "That brat got his own team. Now who want to bet who are in that team?" "Urza, Lucy and Gray." Kiba immediately jumped in without taking a second to think. "Probably Happy too, but does a cat count?" "Probably." And the returned, stronger members of Fairy Tail. So around this time there was no more mission on the guild's mission board, even on the S-class board on the second floor. And of course, every member of the guild was seriously in need for money. "Mine." Natsu cried out and leapt forward, trying to get the mission request paper from the master's hands. "Era, I don't know it's that bad." Mei slightly gasped in surprise while the others just laughed. "Forget it. That's mine." Jet cried out and shot forward with his magic bumping into his legs. "Oh no you don't." Kana pulled out 3 cards and they began to glow with magic. "Magic cast with cards," Shizune stated in surprise. "That's new. I suppose we're going to learn a lot more about the magic of the future, Shizune." Her teacher smiled and put a hand on Shizune's shoulders, "So don't feel so surprised." "Yes, Tsunade-sama." Naruto sighed. Seriously, He's like a combination of Shikamaru and Sasuke, only 10 times worse. Kiba pointed out, and a few who knew those two just couldn't stop themselves from agreeing. There they go again, Naruto thought inside of his head while sipping a cup of orange juice. He didn't know what was so interesting about this guild that Mavis wanted him to come with them, but apparently it was interesting enough to make him stick around. Ah, that's good to hear. Kushina smiled fondly at the thought. For the past week Naruto had considered about leaving the place numerous times, but every time he came to this guild something new happened and he couldn't help but come to the place every morning, though he would never admit it out loud. Admit it, bastard. It's not youthful at all to do that, Naruto-kun. Lee cried out after Kiba. As much as I don't want to say it, he's right. Tobirama nodded, crossing his arms on his chest. Be honest to yourself is always the first step to become a true shinobi. The whole guild then broke out in a massive fight, just like the last time a mission request arrived at the guild master's office. So basically anyone can accept and go on that mission as long as they're the one who have it. It's not actually strategic wise. The younger Senju said after his brother, I believe that like as shinobi, some mage are well suited for some certain mission than the other. Unless we're talking about a normal D rank or C rank mission, where you have to do a simple housework or escort someone through a forest, protecting him from wild animals. Urza let out a sigh in disappointment after finishing her favorite strawberry cheesecake and stood up from her seat. Oh, she's about to end the fight, isn't she? When she was present in the guild and not out doing mission with her team, the Scarlet Head Mage was always the one who won most of the missions for her team. More or less everyone was really afraid of her and didn't want to face her wrath. Seriously, I can't help but think that she's a perfect replica of Kushina. Tsunade said in amusement and everyone burst out in laughter, while Kushina just pouted and crossed her hands on her chest, red head in their temple. I'm not that bad, am I, Minato-kun? She turned to Minato and tried to find some support from her beloved husband, but all he did was gulp slightly and scratch his cheek with a nervous expression on his face. Pissing Kushina, or to be more specific, a red head, off was like a death sentence. But before she could make any move to stop the fight, the master raised his hand and took a deep breath before shouting out. Not the way I'm think, but it will work fine. Sarutobi chuckled. Enough. Instantly the guild stopped their fight and turned their head to look at the master. See. Many leaders like him chuckled. Ahem, now that everyone had calmed down. I have a few things to say before assigning this mission for a mage or a team. This is not a simple mission. His tone changed and became seriously. This is an S-class mission. Quite a few mages gasped out in shock. This was their first S-class mission in many years after the disappearance of the core members of Fairy Tail. Interesting. Tobirama muttered under his breath. It seems the core members of Fairy Tail are all very capable mages. Hashirama stated seriously. Make you wonder what were they doing on the island far from their home. Kakashi looked up from the book, and got attacked by a dragon, and injured even before that. Yes. Natsu cheered, give us that mission. Seriously, do you think that this guy is actually Naruto's descendant? Ino asked in amazement while the others chuckled at her statement. Let me tell you, if Naruto and Hinata's kids are going to act like this, it's not going to be pretty for our village. Let's just hope my grandchildren are going to take after my daughter than him. Hiyashi coughed into his hand, and of course, as Hinata's father he would like to have his grandchildren taking after his daughter more than their father. Ah, Hinata sounds so nice. I want to meet her already. Kushina smiled hopefully. So far, everything she heard about Hinata, from the stories Naruto's friends told her, to the way Hiyashi said that, sounded so amazing to her. Team Natsu was the current one of the only two teams that had S-class mage in it. So you were right, Nadaime-sama. There are rankings among the mage in S-class are the highest, the strongest. Konohamaru turned to the white-haired Senju, only they're allowed to accept that level of mission. It was just like them. Only the Junin and most experienced shinobi in the village could accept S-class mission, the hardest and most dangerous mission, because only they had the powers to finish it and get out alive. Natsu and his team are all S-class mage. His friend, Moegi said in surprise. I don't think so. Ebisu, their teacher said while pushing his glass closer to his face. I believe one S-class mage is enough to bring the whole team with them. it's not necessary for the whole team to be S-class mage to go on one. Many shinobi agreed to his explanation, which caused the man to grin smugly. Who was none other than Titania Urza Scarlet, and the only chance any mage who wasn't S-class yet got the chance of doing the highest ranking missions was having at least an S-class mage accompany them. Urza is an S-class mage. Sakura gasped, but she wasn't that surprised. I think it's quite obvious for someone as capable and as responsible as she is. Tsunade smiled with a nod of her head. Unfortunately Natsu, your team won't be the one who get this mission, Makarov said, making Team Natsu groan out in disappointment and the others to smirk. Wow, it must suck for them, don't you think? Kiba grinned. The master looked around for a moment before his eyes landed on a certain blonde-haired young man who was still separating himself from the guild's everyday activities. Oh, he's about to give it to Naruto, isn't he? Kushina smiled brightly at the mention of her son, once again. I believe he is, Kushina. Minato nodded his head, smiling at his wife. I think it's time for Naruto to get his first mission. All Eye turned to Naruto and he couldn't help but look at the master, with an unreadable expression on his face. Really? Naruto asked. Yes, you're a mage, right? Makarov asked with a smile. That mark on your hand shows that you're not just a mage, but a mage of fairy tale, so I think it's time you take a mission and start your career, fairy tale style. He finished with his smirk widened. Fairy tale style. So they have their own way of handling mission, don't they? Kiba smirked. The more I know these people, the more I like them. We all are. It was the first Hokage who commented. No thank you. Excuse me. Just wait a little, Kushina-sensei. Kakashi chuckled nervously and continued to read on before Naruto's mother could explode and show how bad her temper was. Everyone's face dropped instantly when they heard Naruto said that, but widened their eyes when they saw Naruto stood up from his seat. Give me that paper and I will finish that mission, but I will do it my way. See, the Rokudaime Hokage of Konoha said, and Kushina nodded her head with a satisfied smile. Makarov nodded his head with a smile before dropping the mission request down to Naruto, who caught it into his hand and read. But master, Naruto isn't an S-class mage yet, Urza spoke up. I mean, he is strong, yes, but isn't it illegal to have a normal mage goes on an S-class mission? So, they must have some kind of promotion test to become an S-class mage, just like how we have to in order to become Chunin and then Junin. Neji Hyuga voiced his thought out loud. He was the first of his generation to become Junin, so he understood it better than anyone. I can see that. The second Hokage nodded his head in agreement. Of course, that is the reason why I will need an S-class mage to go on this mission with him. The guild master said before turning his eyes to a certain white-haired demon mage. Excuse me, Kiba exclaimed in shock, are you really saying that that girl is actually an S-class mage? What the hell? Well, I guess the female of the future is living up to the past. Kushina crossed her arms on her chest and grinned smugly. Around the red-head Uzumaki, many kunoichi agreed with her, smirking in satisfaction. So far, the only S-class mage we know is Urza and Mira, and they're both female. Tsunade chuckled. Gildart-san is probably an S-class mage too, since he's Fairy Tail's ace, their strongest. She said, deciding to save the men some face. If Urza can scare the entire guild off, then I wonder just how powerful Mirajan is. Beautiful and dangerous, these female mages have it all, haven't they? Jiraiya chuckled slyly. Who was rushing back and forth to serve beers to everyone present in the guild. Mira, would you like to go on this mission too? This made her stop and looked at the master in surprise. Me? Mira asked, pointing at herself. I'm not sure, master. This is also a great opportunity for you to get back to shape. Makarov grinned. Did something happen to her? Kushina asked in concern. There's a chance that she quit being a mage, or something like that. Mira lost her power after her sister's supposed death. So their magic is affected by their emotions as well. Tobarama spoke up. Deep in thought, a traumatic experience, like the death of someone who is close to them, is enough to take away their power. Suppose death, so Mira's sister is still alive, right? Sakura asked, looking around to get an answer. I believe so, Sakura. Tsunade smiled with a nod of her head. And didn't fight or even train in nearly 3 years. That amount of time is more than enough for your skill to become rusty. A grumbled and some of the brute fighter of Kumo nodded their head in agreement. Becoming weaker and weaker during that time and couldn't defeat the opponents she shouldn't have much trouble against. Plus, Mira seemed to be the only person Naruto talk and sociable with these past few days. Having Mira spend some more times with Naruto alone could be a chance to make Naruto open up more to everyone. It sounds like she can befriend anyone. Shizune smiled. Well, I guess that's not something unexpected. She was so cheerful and friendly to them. Let's just hope that she'll be able to get Naruto out of his emo self. Ino giggled before frowning. Nothing personal, but I miss our current, the knucklehead Naruto already. The shinobi and kunoichi who knew Naruto well, couldn't stop themselves from laughing loudly at the young Yamanaka's words. Naruto, do you want Mira to go with you or should I choose someone else? The guild master asked Naruto, who shrugged. No problem. He replied shortly with his hand waved above his head and started to leave the guild. Hey, wait for me. Mira called out, putting the tray in her hands down to the table and quickly followed behind the blonde young man. There's a line break here. Kakashi informed them before continuing. 2 tickets to Bosco, please, Mira said to the ticket seller and put the required amount of money on to the table in front of him. So, they're going by train. I believe so. Naruto stood beside her with his back leaned against the wall with his eyes closed, seemingly uncared about what was going on around him. He sounds so much like you, Sasuke. Kiba pointed his hand at the one and only Uchiha. What did you do to him? I don't think I understand what you're trying to imply, Inuzuka. Was the only reply Kiba got from Indra's reincarnation. You know what Kiba, the usual silent Shino, Kiba's teammate, spoke up stoically. I don't think that joke is funny anymore. Well, I guess. Here you go. The ticket seller said and gave Mira 2 tickets. The barmaid smiled brightly at him, making the man blush brightly at her beautiful smile before taking them into her hands and walked to Naruto. Well, I guess she's that beautiful, then. Jiraiya giggled slyly. Stop rambling about females' beauties, Jiraiya. Tsunade growled and showed the man her fist, promising a punch into the face if he chose not to do what she told him to. I got the tickets, she said, showing him the 2 tickets within her hands. Then let's go, Naruto said shortly and walked ahead again. How rude of him, Kushina scolded before sighing longingly. It's not like she could do anything about it anyway. Mira pouted at him, the blonde didn't even take a glance at them. That was if she didn't want to admit that he was outright ignoring her. I guess it's a new experience for her, isn't it? For someone who is so beautiful like that, Ino shrugged, I guess even as females have to turn our head to look at her, let alone the men. No one ever did that to the drawing card of fairy tale before, let alone a teenager boy like Naruto. It's because he's an old man, said Onoki. He was no longer at the age of chasing behind attractive women like that, so he understood it. Well, with all due respect Tsuchikage-sama, I don't think age has anything to do with the problem here. The Godime Mizukage smirked. As you can see, there are a lot of pervert old men around here. She didn't say who they were, but it didn't take a genius mindset for everyone to know who she was talking about, specifically. That, Mizukage-sama, I can't agree more. Tsunade grinned and glared at Jiraiya. Mira then turned back to the ticket seller and looked around. It seemed that he sold drinks as well. A few minutes later, Naruto found an empty cabin all for the 2 of them and walked in first as the train began to move. Putting his hand on the window frame, Naruto turned his eyes to stare blankly at the world outside the window, completely unaware of that his mission partner walked into the cabin and closed the door behind her. Naruto, Kushina balled her hand into a fist and growled in disappointment. If she was there, she would love to knock some sense into him for acting like that. No child of her and Minato was going to act like an Uchiha, or Hyuga. Naruto suddenly felt something cold pressed against his cheek and turned his eyes slightly to the side to see Mirajan holding an orange bottle of cold drink with the picture of a slice of orange on it, smiling brightly at him. She sure smile a lot, doesn't she? Tsunade chuckled softly. At least we now know that she's not a moving flowerpot. Yugito spoke up, but still, I wonder how does she use her magic? Since she has demons living inside her body, do you it's like a Jinchuriki? She can tap into their power and use it as her own. Possibly. The first Hokage smiled, but still, this is magic we're talking about. Only time will tell how Miragen-san uses her magic, and the power of demon inside her. Don't just space out like that, Naruto-kun. It will become a bad habit, Mira said as she took the bottle away from Naruto's cheek before saying that to him with a smile, pushing the drink she bought for Naruto forward again, this time in front of him. Here, I hope you will like it. Naruto looked at Mira for a second before taking the orange bottle from her hand. Mira sat down on the seat opposite from Naruto and put the straws of her own bottle of limonade to her lips and slowly sipping the cold juice. Thank you, Naruto said shortly before staring out of the window again. At least he still has some common manner. The fourth Shinobi War's mother shrugged. So, what? But before she could finish her question, Naruto brought out the mission request and showed it in front of her face. Mira blinked once before taking a look at the mission's details. The shinobi straightened up and stayed completely silent to listen to the mission's detail. This mission was about finding an ancient artifact which was stolen a couple of days ago, and from the look of it, Mira was sure that it would take them some time. But the payment was good and that money would help everyone a lot in the guild a lot at this hard time. So, all they have to do is find an ancient artifact. Kiba asked in surprise. No offense to the future people, but I don't think that kind of mission should be classified as S-class. Many shinobi and kunoichi nodded their head in agreement, but the cage thought otherwise. The stolen artifact they are looking for is in the hand of a dark mage, possible more. Naruto said and put the piece of paper back into his pocket before starting to drink his own orange juice. Dark mage. The evil force, I suppose. Sakura shrugged at her best friend. How do you know that? Miragen asked in surprise, as she didn't recall any information about the thieves from the mission request. Yeah, we would love to know about that too. Kiba said his thought out loud. Naruto then pointed his hand to the window outside and Mira couldn't help but turn her head at the direction he was pointing. Since the train wasn't moving very fast, Mira could see a large panel above Magnolia's station, and surprisingly it was about Bosco Museum of Magic Art, the place that currently the owner of the ancient artifact they were looking for. Great observation, the second Hokage said with a small smile. Well, he is a rather observant. Jiraiya shrugged with a smile. He's able to notice details others may overlook, even during our 2.5-year training trip. But Hokage-sama, it still doesn't explain how he knows the artifact is in the hand of Dark Mage. A Chunin of Konoha spoke up, raising his hand. Well, let's find out then. Its ownership belonged to Bosco Museum of Magic Art, one of the only museums on Earthland that is applying magic into their security system. Only mage who specialized in sealing magic can pass through that kind of security, Naruto said with a blank voice. Also, the stolen artifact is a magic staff have the power to steal magic. It is particularly useless for normal thieves and can only be used by mage. Very smart, said Shikaku Nara. So there is a staff that can be used to steal magic from magic users. Kiba exclaimed in surprise. Man, no wonder why it's an S-class mission. Fall into wrong hand, it can become extremely dangerous. Minato said seriously. Steal magic from others and possibly use them as their own. Just imagine how much power one would have if they could steal various different kinds of magic. The shinobi shuddered at the thought of having their abilities stolen from them. Sharingan was a perfect example of stealing technique from the original users. However, it was by copying and mimicking every single movement they made. And these two are going to try to retrieve it. Kushina stated worriedly. I hope it has no power on Naruto, since he doesn't use magic. If it is that, I guess Mira is the one we should worry about. How do you know it is a staff? At that station while you were still busying smiling at that guy, that statement made Mira blushed slightly. Well, that's way to put it. They laughed. Naruto's words for Mira lightened up the atmosphere a little. He had a newspaper and I happened to read the article on the first page. It was about presenting a historic discovery of magic, the Staff of Absolution. Naruto then brought out the mission request and showed it to Mira once again, the same artifact we're looking for. However, it was stolen a couple of days ago, yet we didn't see or hear anything about it from any medias. with the exception of this mission request, which meant the museum wanted to stay as quiet as possible about this since it was a very powerful and dangerous artifact. It also explained why a now nameless mage guild was able to receive this kind of missions, because they don't want to make an unnecessary fuss as well as delay the day. Wow! Kiba exclaimed in shock. I can't even recognize that idiot anymore. Naruto's not stupid. Kakashi shook his head. He is just naive. Plain and simple are the right words to describe his personalities. If you can simplify the situation in the way he usually sees things, he will understand it right away even if it's the hardest one. While headstrong and often acting without thinking, he showed that he is a remarkable tactile learner. Tobirama, who fought alongside with Naruto in the Fourth Great Shinobi War, spoke up. Even I was amazed by his intellect, and saw a great potential as a Hokage in him. That boy could easily surpass even that of my brother, and even his brother. Both Kushina and Minato smiled fondly after hearing such fine words for their son from someone as wise as Tobirama Senju. Seriously. Kiba stuttered in pure shock, completely lost for words because of what he just heard. Damn. Amazing. You're able to tell that much. Mira said in amazement. You're so smart, Naruto-kun. You're like a detective or something, she admitted. Mira and everyone else at Fairy Tail could never imagine something like this from Naruto. I can see that there is still something of the old Naruto in him. He is unpredictable. Surprisingly, it was Sasuke who said that. It's nothing special. Naruto shrugged and shook the bottle, hearing the sound, and he could tell that there was nothing but ice cubes left inside. He reached his hand forward, and to Mira's surprise, he exchanged the bottles with her before leaning back in the same position like before. Kami. Ino squealed loudly in excitement. It's an indirect kiss. The girls around her all became excited, and couldn't stop themselves from giggling at such a scene. Ah, he likes her. Kushina giggled. Ahem, Kakashi, can you continue please? Minato requested his student with a somewhat nervous smile. I only pay special attention to everything that happens around me. The answer for a problem could be anywhere. I see. Mira nodded her head, but how did you know about that staff? Staff of Absolution. She had never heard nor read about such magic artifact that could steal others' magic before, and something that dangerous should be recorded in books. She was no Lucy, but Mira also did a lot of research in the history of magic when she learned how to control her own magic. Did you know there is a massive library on Tenro Island? Naruto asked. That place belonged to Mavis, but she let me have access to it while I was there. You can say that I learned a lot over the years. Why do I have the feeling that he's telling a half-lie again? Kiba face-palmed. Naruto had become a big mystery, to say the least, not only for the people of the future but also the people of his current era. Possibly. Hashirama nodded, and there is a chance that he had already had an encounter with that staff in the past. It was only half true. Naruto did read some books in Mavis' library to kill some of his boredom, but it soon turned out to be boredom too after he had read it so many times. He read the books from that library so many times he became bored with them. Sakura asked in shock, just how many years had he spent on that island? Like I said, he has all the time in the world now. Anyway, now that we know who behind it, this mission should be easy enough. Mira said to Naruto, who only shrugged. There is another line break here. Kakashi informed them once again. Oh my, if it isn't the beautiful Mirajan Strauss. The director of Bosco Museum of Magic Art said while rubbing his hands together, following behind Naruto and Mira as the two made their way inside the museum. I heard that you and the other mages of Fairy Tail had returned after 7 years of missing. I must admit that I'm rather surprised to see your beauty is still as marvelous as before. Marvelous is a huge understatement, man. Jiraiya exclaimed loudly, she's a total hottie. I have to admit that he's right. Tsunade nodded her head, and she must be that popular too, for some stranger to recognize that easily. The two soon arrived at the crime scene, and instead of stopping like Mira to examine the broken showcase, Naruto walked to a picture on the wall and stared at it with his hands in his pocket. Is it because of your magic that grant you the ability to keep your beauty? The man asked, rather flirtatious toward Mira. So demon and the one who uses their power like Mirajan has a longer lifespan than human. Kind of make you wonder if Naruto knows someone who is a demon. All heads turned to look at Jiraiya after they heard him said that. What? It's just a theory. I mean, demon can live a very long time, right? If every single person Naruto makes a bond with keep passing away while he will continue to live on, there's a chance that he will try to seek comfort in someone who can stay with him forever, like a demoness or someone like that. We all heard about stories where demons were particularly immortal, right? And don't tell me that he's going to live many thousand years without sleeping with women. That boy is a man, and not to mention he's my student. If Hinata were here, she would probably attack you right away for saying something like that. Tsunade sighed. However, that is a very interesting theory you have there, Jiraiya. His teacher, the Sandaime Hokage spoke. Let's continue on, I'm sure we will find out about that soon enough. No, it's something else. Mira shook her head and kneeled down to examine the floor around the showcase. Naruto was right, there was some runes written on the floor around it, showing that there used to be a magic circle around the staff to prevent anyone from touching it. From the first look, the runes were very complicated, but she could recognize the magic, which was rather powerful and well prepared. Sealing magic and their magic, Kushina smiled, reminding everyone of the power of Fairy Sphere, as well as the source to create it. Toshi-san, you said, someone broke into this room 2 nights ago without alerting the security system and stole the staff. Mira asked. They must be very strong to be able to get through this kind of barrier. Which will make this mission even more dangerous. Minato pointed out. Yes, I believe that they are mages. The man nodded his head. Naruto glanced around the museum and saw many guards, some of them were mages and seemed to be on guard. The Cage of All Generation were a little confused by that. They believed there must be a reason behind the way Naruto was paying attention to the guards around them. However, they decided to remain silent to see how it would turn out. Yes, my friend also thinks that they are no ordinary thieves, isn't that right, Naruto-kun? Mira smiled at Naruto, who was still having his back at her before standing up. I promise to find them and bring the staff back to your museum, Toshi-san. Mira smiled at him. Oh, I have no doubt, Miragen-san. Toshi smiled at the former model. Model. Ino gasped in surprise before smiling. I knew it. She's a model. No wonder why she's so popular to everyone. We should go look for them soon, Naruto-kun. Mira then walked to Naruto, but got curious when he was still staring at the picture in front of him. You have any idea where to look for first? She whispered to Naruto. Mira had no idea where the staff was and where should they look for it first. In the local town, people did say that there wasn't any dark guild or dark mage 10 miles radius around the town. Interesting. Tobirama smiled with a nod of his head. I have a feeling that Naruto has already known where the staff is. Everyone looked at him in confusion. Keep going, Kakashi. Minato urged his student, who nodded and continued reading right away. Right here, in this museum. EHHH. Many of them gasped and cried out in shock. I knew it. The second Hokage smirked. His words shocked everyone, including the director of the museum and Miragen, as well as all the guards standing around the room. Isn't that right? Toshi-san. Naruto turned around and faced the man. Naruto-kun, what are you talking about? Mira asked, still shocked from what he just said. Yeah, we're feeling the same, thank you very much. Kiba cried and didn't realize that he was talking to the book instead of Mira. I don't think I understand what you are trying to say, sir. The director of the museum said, with a smile on his face. Thought it became somewhat nervous. Shish. Kiba wisely shut his mouth with a sheepish smile. He lured mages here to steal their magic. You're the one who stole the magic staff and made it look like a group dark mages sneaked into this place and stole it. Mira, do you remember what I said about sensing other emotions? Naruto asked, and Mira couldn't help but nod her head. Well, unless that the bald head over there is holding some grudges against you or he simply want to feel your ass. Well, I won't mind feeling her ass, if you ask me. Jiraiya giggled slyly, but everyone chose to ignore him instead. Mira's sweat dropped at that statement. He is having a rather dark and negative emotion toward us. It's a very useful ability, isn't it? Hashirama laughed loudly. My wife had the same power, and she always used it against me. Yeah, especially when you're up to no good, Ni-sama. The god of Shinobi's smile dropped instantly because of his brother's that statement. while the others just laughed at another reminder of Hashirama's rather boisterous personality. Is it true, Toshi-san? Mira asked, looking at the man with her eyes hardened. A cruel smirk then appeared on his face as the man looked at Naruto and Mira darkly. A magic circle appeared within his hand, and in a flash the staff of absolution appeared and glowed with an aura of dark magic. Naruto glanced around and saw that the guards around them removed their clothes and appeared to be bloodthirsty mob of dark mage, with magic weapons glinted dangerously within their hands. Ah, typical bad guys. Kiba smirked. Cruel smile, bloodthirsty grin, dark expression, killing intent look in their eyes, but tell you, they're the weakest kinds of bad guys. That was something many could agree on. I must admit, boy, Toshi laughed as he held the staff within his hand, you're very smart. The first mage who didn't fall into my trap right away, unlike many others who got their magic being taken away from them before I ended their life. He chuckled darkly before saying, tell me, how? Everyone held their breath. A smirk appeared on Naruto's face, as he crossed his arms on his chest and a cool aura appeared around him. Mira couldn't help but look at him and gulped slightly, waiting for the usual quiet blonde to show off his awesome intelligence like that teenager detective who was turned into a kid in a series she read when she was younger. Well, that is only my instinct. I was not too sure about it, so I decided to test my theory through a joke, but you felt for my trick right away, which was rather pathetic, I must say. Mira immediately face-palmed. The same could be said for the shinobi who was listening. They were all expecting something way cooler than that. TCH, that boy, I guess he will never change that way. Tobirama growled under his breath. Believe in your instinct. Hashirama nodded and got back on his chair. Having expecting Naruto to say something a lot cooler than that with all that know-it-all aura around him. You. Toshi gritted his teeth in anger before pointing his staff forward. No matter, I will just take your magic then. And the staff of absolution began to glow. Careful, everyone cried. They were more concerned about Mira than Naruto. She was a mage, so there was a chance that her magic could be taken away. Protect her, Naruto. Kushina muttered, crossing her finger. Stay back, Naruto. Mira cried out and stood in front of him with her arms raised a little, but to her shock, Naruto suddenly pushed through her and walked calmly toward Toshi with his hands in his pocket. That's my boy. Minato smiled with a nod of approval. Her eyes then widened in horror as she saw golden energy started to be released from Naruto. Excuse me, what? Even the Yondaime Hokage was surprised by how the situation had turned out. So it has the power to take away chakra as well, as long as it's classified as power. The white-haired Senju concluded. But he got screamed right into his face by an extremely worried Kushina. That's not the point here, Nadaime-sama. And was soused into the staff. Toshi grinned in satisfaction as he felt himself got more and more powerful. In a few seconds and the stupid blonde mage would collapse and his body withered away like an old leaf. Please be alright, please be alright, please be alright. Kushina kept repeating under her breath, afraid that something might happen to her son. Don't worry, Kushina. Minato held his wife's hand to give her some comfort, he's going to be alright. But she wasn't convinced, at all. However, much to everyone's shock, Naruto kept walking forward like nothing happened and stood directly in front of Toshi with a lazy expression on his face. Mira wanted to interfere, but something was telling her that she should stand here and watch what would happen next. It must be because of his massive chakra reserve. Even though he had already known how great Naruto's chakra reserve was, Kakashi was still felt amazed by it. Combined with Kurama, the amount of chakra he has inside him is at times unpredictable, possibly greater than any of us put together. And don't forget that he's an immortal. Pointed out. Go on, suck them all out. Naruto challenged with a sly smirk as more and more energy was drawn from his body. Yeah, feel like a mosquito sousing my blood or something like that. We get the point, goddammit. Kiba cried, holding his head. His hand suddenly shot out and grabbed the staff. Sorry pal, he said in a very slow tone, so low that only Toshi could hear him. Last time I let a guy use this staff to suck all the energy he wanted from me, he turned to something that I would like to call a pain in the ass and destroyed a whole city before I cared enough to put a stop to it. So I was right. Hashirama nodded his head. He did have an encounter with the staff in the past. And the pain in the ass he was talking about. Sakura sweat dropped at her friend's choice of words, must be something akin to Kyuubi's berserk state. That's right. He then tightened the grip around the staff, and to Tosi's shock, cracks began to appear on it. Can't let you do the same thing. Sorry. Naruto then pushed the staff forward and hit Tosi hard on his head, knocking the mage out. Just like that? Ino asked in shock. Yes, just like that. Everyone's sweat dropped. The blonde then raised the staff before slamming it down to the floor, so hard that it broke the stone floor and impaled deeply into it. Let's see. Naruto reached his hand into the man's inner pocket and pulled out a stack of checks. Since we found your staff, we will take the reward for this mission, 1,000,000 jewels. Oh ho, nice brat. Tsunade grinned and gave a thumb up. Never forget about the money, I'm so proud of him right now. Hashirama looked at his granddaughter and couldn't help but sigh in disappointment, with a gloomy atmosphere around him. Sigh, it's all right, brother. Tobirama patted him on his shoulder, giving his older brother some comfort. I understand. Naruto then wrote down the amount he needed before perfectly copying his signature, which Naruto saw on the mission request. He then tore away the check from the stack. Thank you. He wrote down a few more words and threw it down the man's face. Let's go, Mira, Naruto said and walked out of the museum. Hey, what about the staff? Sakura gasped in surprise. He cannot possibly leave something that dangerous back to the evil mage, can he? Wait for me, Naruto. Mira cried out and quickly followed behind Naruto. As she crossed Tosi's unconscious form, she couldn't help but glance at the stack of checks on his face. Her eyes widened when she saw the words Naruto wrote on it. Fuck you. Muahahaha. Everyone burst out in laughter after hearing that. Even the most stoic person like Sasuke had to have a small smirk on his face. Oh man, that's gold. Pure gold right there. Kiba was the one who laughed the hardest, and he had to hold onto his stomach to control himself. It took them a full minute to calm down, but eventually the laughter died down and everyone quickly got back to their seats to continue listening to the story. After the two mages of Fairy Tail left, the dark mages managed to get over their shock and fear and quickly ran over to check on their leader. Some gathered around the staff and tried to pull it out of the ground. However, no matter how they tried, the dark mages could make the staff move a single inch. Nice. Minato grinned but then said, but still, all they have to do is break the ground around the staff and they can get it out easily. Let's just hope that these mages have learned their lesson. Which, Tsunade doubted they had. I'm back, everyone, Mira said cheerily and opened the door of her guild, letting Naruto walk in first before following behind him, much to the shock of their fellow guildmates. That was fast. Urza stuttered. You found the artifact already? She asked in surprise. Interesting way of showing how mature Naruto has become, I must say. Tsunade smiled fondly. I must admit, I miss the old Naruto. Jiraiya said with a small chuckle. However, turn out that he's not as bad as we think he is, right? Yeah, at least, he still has some kind of sense of humor, and still not that hard to talk to.